Hello, everybody. This video will cover the Chemthink assignment on ions, Chemthink ions. This was assigned during the fourth week of the remote learning, May 3rd through May 10th. Okay, so I'm going to log on with my fake student. Okay. So notice that it says covalent bonding here. And for some reason, I've talked about this before, but for some reason, it always opens with covalent bonding. Well, we don't want to do covalent bonding right now. We want to do the ion. So I have to go back to the main menu, right down here. And I'm going to go back. And there we are. Now, also, I am going to get rid of my face so we have more room to see. Okay, so notice that there's no activity here that says ions. So I have to go down to where it is. There it is. This one is due on Sunday of this week at 11:59 p.m. Okay, so I'm going to press it, go to the tutorial. At certain times, atoms can gain or lose one or more electrons. When this happens, we say that the atom has formed an ion. It's no longer referred to as an atom, it's referred to as an ion. Ions are just individual atoms or groups of atoms that have a charge. This charge comes from an imbalance in the number of positive protons and negative electrons. Let's go forward. Since the electrons don't really contribute to the mass of the atom, gaining or losing electrons does not change the overall mass of the atom. It does, however, affect it in other ways, in major ways. Ions can behave very differently than the atoms from which they are formed. As we will see in later units, forming ions is one way that atoms bond together, for example, to make new substances. And I've talked several times in the class, that it's really what is going on with the electrons that determines chemistry. Okay, pictured at the left is a lithium ion. Let's take an inventory of the particles that are present. 3 protons, they're the blue circles or spheres. 3 electrons, they're the littler spheres, and they're black and they're on the outside. And 4 neutrons. Now notice that the electrons, each of them has a positive charge, so we have 3 pluses. There's 3 pluses here. There are 3 electrons, 1, 2, 3, and so there are 3 negatives. So there's 3, and then there's a negative 3, plus 3, and then there's 4 zeros. There's 4 neutrons. So they indicate that by 4 zeros, but hey, 0 is a 0. It doesn't matter how many zeros you put down, it's still 0. If you add this together, 3 plus 3 minus 3, the overall charge is 0. Adding up the charges gives us a total charge of 0 for the atom. We would write the symbol for a neutral uncharged lithium atom as shown below. So if you look up in the periodic table, this is what you will see. Under some conditions, lithium atoms can lose 1 electron. So there it goes. Now, notice that the net charge is plus 1 because, again, we have 3 plus charges, plus 3. Now we only have a -2. We still have 0 from the neutrons. If you add those together, 3 minus 2 equals +1. When this happens, the lithium ion is formed, and we indicate that. And the reason it has a +1 is there are 3 protons, but only 2 electrons. And we indicate that by writing down the symbol, the formula, and we put a plus on it. A charged lithium ion behaves very differently than an uncharged lithium ion. Now let's look at an atom that gains electrons to become an ion. Pictured at the left is an oxygen atom. Let's count the particles. So there are 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8 protons, so that's 8 positives. So that'd be +8. There are also 8 electrons. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that'd be -8. And then there are 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 neutrons with no charge. The net charge, after adding up all the charges, gives us a total charge of 0. We would write the symbol for a neutral uncharged oxygen atom as shown below. It's just a big, huge capital 0. Oxygen atom can, under some conditions, gain 2 electrons. There they are. So now, instead of 8 electrons, so we still have the 8 protons. Now we have -10 charge from the electrons. 8 minus 10 is -2. The ion has a -2 charge because now there are 10 electrons, but only 8 protons. We would write the symbol for the oxygen ion as follows. And again, I'll write it big here. Oops. And we notice how we put the 2 first before we put the minus sign. So the minus sign goes second. A charged oxygen atom behaves very differently than an uncharged oxygen atom. And it's dramatic. The difference is dramatic. Having that little negative charge there makes it like a little tiny magnet that's looking for a positive charge. So what have we learned? Negative ions are formed when atoms gain electrons. Positive ions are formed when atoms lose electrons. Protons are never gained or lost when the ions are formed. It's not the protons that change in an atom, it's the ions. If the protons do change in an atom, you make a new atom, and that only occurs when there is some sort of nuclear reaction going on. And by the way, negative ions are called anions. Positive ions are called cations. Okay, sometimes groups of atoms form ions. Groups of atoms can form ions. And these are called polyatomic ions. Poly means many, atoms and ions. So if you have a group of ions that form an ion, they're called polyatomic ions. Let's look at a few examples. In order for a bond of oxygen atom with a hydrogen atom to form, an extra electron is needed. Now, you learned why this is the case when we talked about covalent bonding. Each atom wants 8 electrons. So, but except for hydrogen, hydrogen only needs 2 electrons to fill out its outer shell. So let's keep going. The dots around the atoms indicate the electrons that can form bonds. These are the valence electrons. And remember, oxygen atom has 8 electrons, but 6 of those electrons are in the outer shell. It takes 2 electrons to form a bond. Hydrogen has a single electron it can contribute, but oxygen has no electrons that it can contribute. In order to bond, these 2 atoms will need an extra electron. There it is. And now they can form a bond. Because it took an extra electron to bond the 2 atoms together, they now have an overall charge of -1. And notice how to indicate that, we put brackets around the whole molecule, the whole Lewis structure, and then we put a negative sign. This is the polyatomic ion called hydroxide. So that's how you write the Lewis structure. To write the formula, we would write OH minus. And notice that in this case, we don't put a 1 there because we usually don't write down the 1. Okay, here are some more examples. The sulfate ion. It takes 2 extra electrons to bond a sulfur atom to the 4-oxygen atom. So this polyatomic ion has a -2 charge. And again, in our covalent bonding chapter, you learned how to make this structure and you learned why it forms that sort of structure. Here's the ammonium ion. These atoms have to lose 1 electron to bond together. So this polyatomic ion has a +1 charge. In summary, positive ions are formed when atoms lose electrons. They're called, what are they called? Here we are, cations. Negative ions gain electrons. They're called anions. And only electrons can be gained or lost. Protons do not change in an atom when it's becoming an ion. If protons do change, then it's no longer the same atom. Groups of atoms that have gained or lost electrons are called polyatomic ions. Okay, so that's it. I am going to make another video of the question set. So look for that, and I will see you in the next, or I will hope you see me in the next video. Bye-bye.